Manufacturing Matters is an MFG Radio Network production brought to you by GIE Media's Manufacturing Group as industry experts take deep dives into the latest manufacturing matters, whether it's new innovations, products, technologies, and emerging markets that help you understand better why manufacturing matters to you and also to the top companies in the medical, aerospace, defense, and electric vehicle manufacturing industries. Hello and welcome to our latest webinar, Revitalizing the Defense Maritime Industrial Base. I'm Jay Kaufman, the managing editor for GIE Media's Manufacturing Group of Publications. We have aerospace manufacturing and design, defense and munitions, today's medical developments, and EV design and manufacturing. First things up today is we'd like to thank our 2025 series sponsor, Renishaw, who is helping transform your manufacturing. Renishaw is a world-leading supplier of measuring systems and production systems. Its products produce high accuracy and precision gathering data to provide customers and end users with traceability and confidence in what they are making. This technology also helps customers to innovate their products and processes. The company is a global business with more than 5,000 employees located in 36 countries, where it has wholly owned subsidiary operations. The majority of R&D takes place in the UK, with the largest manufacturing sites located in the UK, Ireland, and India. Renishaw is guided by its purpose, transforming tomorrow together. This means working with customers to make products, create the materials, and develop the therapies that are going to be needed for the future. For information about Renishaw, you can go to the website that is linked in the chat box. Also, remember that at Renishaw, innovation matters. You can check out the latest issue of their company magazine, which also is available in the chat box. Remember that you can read more about Renishaw's technologies and real-world applications. Once again, the latest issue is available for download. We'd also like to thank today's sponsors, Mazak, ProMess, Smithers, and SMW Autoblock. Now, Mazak Corporation is a leader in the design and manufacture of productive machine tool solutions, committed to being a partner to customers with innovative technology. Its world-class facility located in Florence, Kentucky, produces more than 70 models of turning machines, multitasking machines, and vertical machining centers. They also include 5-axis models, hybrid additive processing machines, and Swiss turning machines. Continuously investing in manufacturing technology allows Mazak's iSmart factory to be the most advanced and efficient in the industry, providing high quality and reliable products. Mazak maintains 8 technology centers across North America to provide local hands-on applications, service, and sales to support its customers. Also, ProMess delivers high-precision assembly and test solutions tailored to the defense industry, including systems certified for use in the hazardous environments C2, Div 2, and C2 Div 1. Their electric press technology offers unmatched control, data collection, and reliability for mission-critical applications. From munitions assembly to aerospace components, ProMess engineering ensures safety, repeatability, and adaptability, meeting the rigorous demands of modern defense manufacturing. Smithers is an international leader in the testing, inspection, certification, and compliance industry. Smithers Quality Assessments is one of 8 divisions of Smithers Quality Assessments, was accredited in 1993, and since that time has served as a certification body for several standards, including ISO 9001, AS 9100, IATF 16949, and more. Most recently, Smithers Quality Assessments became a authorized CMMC third-party assessor organization, a C3PAO. Smithers Quality Assessments can audit companies against the ISO 27001 standard. And SMW Autoblock is a work holding company focused on achieving customers' goals and expectations with the highest quality products and services. SMW Autoblock combines stocked standard products with a highly trained sales, service, and engineering team to consistently provide the ideal work holding solutions to customers across a wide variety of industries. Today's presenter, Tim Shambara, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Blue Forge Alliance, the Navy's neutral partner for enabling the maritime industrial base. Tim is responsible for BFA's Alliance Network, Government Affairs, and Enterprise Strategy. Prior to Blue Forge, he served the manufacturing technology sector for 12 years as the VP of Chief Technology Officer for AMT. Prior to AMT, he supported several DoD programs of record as a manufacturing engineer at Northrop Grumman. Tim has served in multiple roles and levels, advancing the state of the United States manufacturing technology in both public and private sectors, including boards like the MT Connect Institute, county commissions, and as an ASME Congressional Fellow in the United States Senate for then Senator Marco Rubio. Without any further ado, Tim, the floor is all yours.
Oh, thanks, Jake. And thanks everybody for joining, at least on the East Coast, for lunch. One of the things that I have a privilege to do is explain a bit of the Blue Forge Alliance story. And that's partly what today is about, who we are and what it is that we do. There will be a time for Q&A, and I hope, though, that you would consider, as we go forward in the public domain at different events, joining in audiences and joining us for this mission that we'll start to talk about, that is revitalizing the defense maritime industrial base. So unfortunately, we're in a time where the industrial base is really being pressured. It's been about 50 years since we have had an opportunity to invest and modernize our maritime industrial base, particularly the submarine industrial base. So to give you a little bit of the status quo, what's happening, the U.S. Navy is in the middle of doing a couple things. One is replacing the Ohio ballistic missile submarine class subs with the new Columbia class sub. But also they're replacing their guided missile submarine force with Virginia payload module submarines. So you're looking at new construction for the Columbia, continuing sustainment and new construction for the Virginia class, plus the Virginia payload module modification, all while still sustaining the existing Ohio's and LA class subs. This has been because of that lack over the last 50-ish years, and really because of policy and posture in the US. There has been a desire, if you will, to turn a light switch and just turn the industrial base on. And I think most people on this call will understand that that is not how this occurs. And really, we're living in a lot of consequential, or in a consequential time of decisions and investments, particularly not made. But we're going to do this together. And that's what this sort of story is for us today. How do you come about in a moment in time with a whole of nation, whole of government approach to uplift this maritime industrial base for a very specific and strategic reason of the Columbia and the Virginia class submarines? But it goes beyond that, right? The maritime industrial base includes ships. And we would say, if we can do this for the industrial base for the subs, it has a ripple effect, not only to ships and Navy, but to other services and for the whole of the defense industrial base. And maybe this is a moment in time that we in the US can bolster and what we, the words we use, to galvanize and to uplift the industrial base. From those 50 years of non-priorities, if you will, in the government and investment and in spending, there have become now obvious three key constraints in the capacity, meaning the ability to deliver a sub. We look at this through the shipbuilders. So we have, by some measures, 70% less suppliers in general in the submarine or in the defense industrial base since I think it was 1990s, the early 90s. We certainly have a greater strain on the shipbuilders to deliver than they have seen in a while. We also have all the suppliers for us in the submarine industrial base. It's about 15 to 16,000, give or take, that participate in some level. But they're very fragmented geographically, even with some communications. Sometimes even you walk into some of these manufacturing facilities and they don't know that their parts are even going into a submarine. And so there's a lot of discontinuity and disconnect that we're seeing in the supply base. And for this call, I certainly don't have to go far into the description of the workforce, this vanishing talent pool, certainly in the trades and skills, but also just in the technology, engineering, and math, almost the STEM related areas. And the manufacturing sector is not unique, right? There's a broad macroeconomic condition that's really taking away a lot of the workforce and not replenishing as well as it should from the pipeline. So we'll get into some of that. And part of our job at Blue Forge Alliance is to understand this industrial base. This is a way to look at it, and it's twofold. The left side really looks at the employee. This is just to give us a better understanding of what type of businesses are we referring to and talking about. So 70% of any manufacturing employee work at a company with fewer than 500 employees, and about a third work with less than 100 employees. And on the flip side of that same coin, the businesses themselves, 98% of all manufacturers in the US are less than 500 employees. And 500 is the limit, if you will, defined by the Small Business Administration of a small business. But the story is even more dire than that, because 76% of those actually have less than 50 employees, and then over half less than 20 employees. So we're talking about, when we say fragmented, it's fragmented, and it's also a very distinct business sector set that we have to go help and support to galvanize and uplift the entire industrial base. So that comes with it some challenges, certainly some more unique than others. And that kind of brings us back to the genesis story, if you will, of Blue Forge Alliance. Early in 2022, the Navy, they were mulling over this issue, this problem. How do you galvanize and uplift? How do you get the industrial base on schedule for what they call on time, on delivery of products and components going into ultimately the submarine? And our co-founders and co-CEOs, Rob Gorham, Kylie Wren, had come from pretty interesting backgrounds. Rob Gorham, if you know America Makes, was an executive director of America Makes. So he had this understanding of a public-private partnership. He had also come from Lockheed Martin. And Kylie Wren had come out of NASA and Lockheed Martin, but also together, Kylie and Rob had started Secure America. So there was already some understanding of what a public-private partnership could do. And they had these values, and they had this business model about what partnerships and alliance, if well activated, could help, and the types of challenges that it could overcome. And so they were brought into this discussion with the Navy, really just by a friend of a friend, if you will, in the Office of Secretary of Defense. And when the Navy heard what Rob and Kylie had built, and using words like culture, and using words like a public-private partnership, 501c3 to do this kind of business, the Navy decided to go all in. And so that was the genesis, that November of that year, of Blue Forge Alliance, 501c3 nonprofit. The way we view a lot of this is, as a nonprofit third party, is we are to inform and convene the industrial base and other customer stakeholders for this whole mission, uplift and galvanizing that industrial base. And we need to do it through what we call non-traditional approaches. And at the end of the day, we're kind of grading ourselves a bit on how do you do that with speed, access, and scale. And for us, it has to be a whole of government and a whole of nation. Whole of government, meaning we happen to be highly focused on the Columbia program as a program executive office within the Navy. But we know the ripple effect. We know that if we can concentrate on the core tenets of improving such industrial bases for the submarines, that has broader impacts. And if we can do this with a model that talks about partnerships, our alliance, which is in our namesake, then that's the best way we saw to deliver this industrial base improvement at speed, access, and with scale. And we think about these things with words like alliance and ecosystems, which obviously we'll talk a little bit more about today. But going back, when the Navy was studying this and other think tanks and other government agencies, the cost assessment and program evaluation, CAPE assessment, was done on the Columbia program. And they were trying to understand how can in this case, whole of government side, how can they understand the problem to align congressional appropriations to get funding to the Navy about very specific things. And they came up with 5 lines of effort. So these are congressionally appropriated lines of effort: supplier development, workforce development, technology development, shipyard infrastructure, and strategic outsourcing. And as Blue Forge Alliance came in and we started to understand the problem and looking at things across a broader spectrum, we understood that almost regardless of the sector for an industrial base, there were really 3 primary things that we needed to focus on to improve. This became the multifaceted approach to this production capacity problem. So we look at supply chain optimization, and we, of course, workforce development and advanced technology. Sometimes we refer to advanced technologies as manufacturing technologies or advanced manufacturing, but it's more than just the technology itself. There's enablers as well. So one of the things that we have found at Blue Forge Alliance has been, if this model works well by leveraging partnerships and alliances, and we focus on the right things, supply chain optimization and workforce development and advanced technology, that perhaps there is a broader application space, a solution set, if you will, not just for the submarine and maritime industrial base, or even maybe not only the defense industrial base, but maybe this is a way in which we can galvanize and uplift even the US manufacturing industrial base. So when we think about supply chain optimization, a couple things. It's really about capability and capacity and improving on those things. Now, currently, there's work spanning all 50 states, and we're thinking about investments and strategic partnerships to go help those things. But this is the process today. There are assessments that are ongoing. So the currently existing supply chain and suppliers, there are criteria that if you are, for example, on a service critical sequence material, if you're on one of those product lines, if you are on a critical choke point for timing, if you are otherwise on a scorecard yellow or red, and those are old terms, but I'll just use that for today, then there are assessments. So it starts with a self-assessment. If the scorecards show that other help is needed and you're on that critical path and sequence critical materials, then there are physical assessments that occur in person on the shop floors. So those assessments then inform what we call the POAM. So those in the project management world and all that will understand the plan of action and milestones. But those POAMs tell us how we can rectify, reconcile, or otherwise improve the situation, right? And it's hard because these are not audits. These are supposed to be ways in which we walk beside suppliers with the Navy and the primes. So when you go through that kind of process, we then create the plan of action and milestones and map that to people who can help, solutions. And we have funds to do that. The Navy authorizes and approves these funds called the Supplier Development Fund. So there are many ways. That's one way in which we get dollars and help, counsel, consultation, and other technologies into these shops that need it the most. And that's for today. You know, other things that we're doing in this supply chain optimization is also understanding, well, who are the new companies or new entrants, if you will, into the submarine industrial base or defense industrial base, and how can we get them qualified through the primes to participate and support and really take some pressure off the rest of the industrial base. We call those companies the new entrants coming in, or we call them hidden capacity, or sometimes there's underutilized capacity. So maybe it's a company who's already in the defense industrial base, but maybe not submarine, or maybe they are doing submarine work, but could be doing additional submarine work. So these points are things that we're trying to look out for as well. And of course, the workforce and development issue. We think of these things at Blue Forge Alliance through two lenses. We try to fund projects and programs that develop just that, programs, certifications, whether that's training, credentials, but also separately pathways. So how can you, for the future, get these students and to become employees? How do you get employees attracted into your industry? So there's a lot that is going into K through 12 and industry associations and local community organization partnerships to make aware this opportunity in the submarine and maritime industrial base. But we don't want to lose sight on who is working and who wants to improve in that submarine industrial base today. So we have coined inside Blue Forge Alliance with our leader, Josh Kramer, CREW, 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 Champions in Response to Education and Workforce. We're looking at ways in which we can add capacity to these existing pipelines, but also introduce those new training programs that maybe are in adjacent sectors, but have relevance in the submarine industrial base. So there are many things that are happening through the workforce development efforts. And to round out those three major lines of effort is technology development. In this case, or in this space, we have 4 swim lanes. The first one is additive manufacturing, followed by robotics and automation, non-destructive testing, and Industry 4.0. Part of the things that we're doing is trying to align why look into a technology and where does it apply within the submarine and maritime industrial base. Particularly with additive, we look at the reduction in delays. And you can think about castings and forgings and the timeline to get those things poured and so on and so forth. And also any other raw material choke point from a lead time perspective. Are there ways in which we could utilize, particularly metals, like we've done this with metal additive manufacturing with directed energy deposition and powder bed fusion across multiple, I think it's like 6 different material systems right now. But how do you reduce delays with a technology like additive manufacturing? And for robotics and automation, we know that we can't turn the workforce quantity on like a light switch overnight. So how can you marry up these complementary technologies to augment our worker, or where our worker quantities are today? And how can we get them to be more productive at an individual level without it, quote unquote, taking my job, right? It's a lot of data behind how robotics and automation can really empower and grow a worker, not take a job away. But you just have to be diligent about that stuff. And with non-destructive inspection and testing, one of the biggest delays that we have to deal with is for the inspection equipment to be available and utilized, or the current processes that are being applied. Now, we cannot remove ourselves or relieve ourselves of the soup ship and the safety standards that are required on a submarine. That's not what this is about. But what it is about is how can we modernize ways in which we look and inspect certain weldments, right, or other things. So there's a non-destructive testing swim lane for that. And originally it started really with additive manufacturing only. But what we have found is that there are even broader spaces and application spaces that NDT may be improved and then also adopted to help us in some of those delivery on time and in full delivery metrics. When you think about Industry 4.0, I'm not a huge fan of the term. It kind of means a lot of different things, not everybody. But it is the enabler force for us. What do you do with this thing called AI, for example? And how do we exploit data? And is connectivity necessary, and to what end? So Industry 4.0 does have some relevance. So we're trying to look at all 4 of these sectors, subsectors, I guess you might want to call it, to understand how can we improve on delivery and on quality. So time and quality and quantity. And that's a little bit of how we think about the technology development as a force multiplier. So taking one step back, when you think about our business model, as a 501c3 Blue Forge Alliance, there's really four things that describe us. Public-private partnerships first and foremost. Second, this national scale and catalyzed locally. There are things that happen around the nation that are good. But how do you take that goodness and bring it to somewhere else that needs it and still respect and appreciate, if not curate, to that very specific locality? And how do we make informed decisions? And how do we know that we're progressing? And then back to some non-traditional ways and initiatives in which we at Blue Forge Alliance can help across those three lines of effort of workforce development and technology and supply chain optimization. For me, I do think about this through a business lens, actually. Partnerships and ecosystems, partnerships as a service. That phrase to me conveys how we scale. We're not going to do this by putting 2,000 or 20,000 people at Blue Forge Alliance. We'll do it with, say, 200 just for a sense of scale. And what we do, we lean on our partners. So networks of networks, people who know the other folks. But that's how we want to scale. That is how I would call and define our business model, partnerships as a service. And then there's ecosystems. If we stick with the business lens, I would say that's our go-to-market strategy. So we care intently about an ecosystem. So what's an ecosystem? It also means many things to many people. An ecosystem may be better, a business network might be a better phrase, but it's where you have companies who are doing business with one another already. And if we deliver something from a funded project that Navy approves and authorizes, it goes to a place, zip code, a company, and they're able to accelerate our mission while still exercising their capabilities and capacities. But they're not dependent on a Blue Forge Alliance check or a federal dollar check to stay in business. So these ecosystems are the means by which projects and other investments get into the industrial base. So we are hyper-focused on these communities and how do you support them better? What does public-private partnerships kind of mean for us? This is just a subset of some of the types of partners that we partner with, the companies we partner with. We're not going to go around the horn there, if you will, but these folks have a couple attributes. They have a strong network of networks in some cases. So we might have a question come to us, and then we're able to go and find our hub spoke network of folks who can be subject matter experts at the ready and on call. Some of these folks have deep benches of very specific expertise. So again, we're not trying to put 2,000 people at Blue Forge Alliance, but we have partners that do that. And some of these folks know their regions really, really well, and they understand our sector space and have for a long time. So there's a lot of different ways as we think about who should be as a partner in our alliance. And we're going to be coming we're going to get a little more official with that alliance this year. And you'll hear more about that later on this year. But this is how we think about a public-private partnership. What does the government need from a requirement standpoint? What are the other government funding that we might be able to, we quote unquote call it braid together? But who are the folks who are going to help us scale it out? And that's sort of how we look at public-private partnerships. When we think about this integrate nationally and catalyze locally, which is an internal phrase we use quite often, it is thinking about what already exists, leveraging the expertise. So sometimes these could be facilities that already exist. Maybe they're unique, or maybe they're an extension for capacity. Sometimes there are groups that have capabilities that with their core competencies complement and advance, if not accelerate, our mission. There are individuals we talked about from the public-private partnership that have very specific subject matter expertise that we can tap into. And the braided funding falls under this program. So are there other federal or state programs that exist that we could complement so a dollar stretches farther? Is there a way to get more people aware of what's happening with our mission so that in their funded programs or projects that it could be complementary and advance our mission statement in that way? And there's a ton of experience that we have realized is necessary for this very, I'll say complex versus complicated Complicated meaning lots of many elements that have variabilities that are well known, versus complex meaning same high number of elements where each element is actually highly unknown, right? So there's a complexity to this that really requires some experience in how we walk things through. And on the data side, we don't want to do this blindly. We want to be informed about many things, and we want to be able to measure our progress. So the full kind of banner, a better banner for integrate nationally and catalyze locally is, where can we find bits of all these things that already exist or already performing around the US? Take that which is good and then transfer and scale that nationally, not as a one-off, one-size-fits-all model, but more of a curated solution to a very particular region or locality, and thinking about what it is that they need, because they do life different in Maine than they do it in Texas, and then they do it in Chicago, than they do it in Portland. We want to appreciate that for sustainability's sake. Part of that data story, and this is a gross oversimplification of it, but part of that data story is, how do we collate, how do you validate data about things like projects that get funded by Congress and through the Navy, right? There's a lot of awareness and accountability and transparency that's required with congressional funding. So how do you ensure we have the right functions and metrics in place, that the right targets are, enabling the right strategies? And then how do we measure against that? And once we learn something from a project or a partnership or an initiative, how do you close that loop? How do you feed that back into the system so that we improve on our everything from project management to project execution? For us, we look at this to the Congress who appropriates. Are we moving the needle? What is it that we did that made material difference in this mission? And we think about it from a Navy customer perspective. Which lever did we pull, and did we get the right widget or gadget from pulling it? And each of those have a continuous loop kind of evolution, learning more to optimize and improve each time. But that's just part of the story. The reason integrated data is there in the middle is not because of all the things I just said, though it's part and parcel to that. There's a whole host of other information and data sets that have a significant impact on the industrial base, whether it's specific production data or quality data, could be market space or economic data. Certainly there's risks that we're starting to uncover and to be able to better quantify. There's political and government and procurement and contractual stuff. So how can we at Blue Forge Alliance, as an informer and a convener, be a neutral partner to the Navy and to Congress in this, to integrate such data so we have better dashboards to understand what is working, how to prioritize? So a lot of the informing from data is to inform the Navy's investments, that we're investing in the right things at the right time, and have they made material impact against our mission, against moving the needle for the congressional interest. So there's a lot in here about data. And if I were just to say we are a data centric or a data backed or a data informed company, that's kind of, yes, everyone is trying to do that, and that doesn't tell a whole lot. But this gets into a little bit of the things that Blue Forge Alliance are trying to do as a neutral integrator, and the kind of data that we see is relevant and makes sense, and we want to ensure has the visibility that is necessary. I did want to spend just a minute on some of these non-traditional initiatives. I know most folks, if they don't know Blue Forge Alliance, they certainly are aware to some extent of buildsubs.com, buildsubmarines.com. That's in that bottom box, and there's in the middle. This type of platform is more than just a recruitment tool, though. We use the word aggregate demand for a reason. There are many jobs that by consolidating some of those recs into one place is helpful. But not only that, it also allows for people to build out their own profiles, what they're looking for, and are they aligning to what these job recs have? And more importantly, maybe an example, are they qualified for those jobs? So there's also training that's incorporated into buildsubmarines.com. And with our partner first mentality, we did that for scale with the partner ZipRecruiter. We weren't going to just build out our own job board, if you will, right? There's a lot of things that are happening through ZipRecruiter that allow us to scale both the access and the information about marrying up talent to opportunities. And through some of those recruitment channels, we've entered into some very non-traditional, particularly for the Navy, partnerships on recruitment and the marketing campaign. So you may have seen the car with the mission, the submarines.com car with RFK Racing. We've done partnerships strategically with RFK Racing, also with Major League Baseball, with the WNBA and the NCAA. So you'll see often in regions that have a significant impact to our current industrial base, having such ad campaigns and with such partners in those venues. So the interesting part about the campaign, so I want to spend just a little bit of time here, is that those sectors, when you think about, in this case, NASCAR, Major League Baseball, WNBA, they have some of the highest percentage of engineering, technology experience and credentials and training, trade skills, credentials and training of almost any sector. This was one opportunity that we saw that most folks don't know, that there is a great opportunity in building submarines and in shipbuilding as well within the Navy. Most folks just didn't know. And this was a play not just for recruitment of people, but a pathway. And how do you path find for those people trying to find those opportunities? So those two stuck out as a very non-traditional, who would think, Navy and NASCAR, if you will. And so that was a strategic domino effect, if you will, of trying to attract and get folks into the hiring pipeline for the primes. And we'll talk a little more how we're progressing against that and some others. And I also want to spend just a moment on the Advanced Manufacturing Academic Consortium. Consortiums exist all day long in most places. Why is this one any different? I would say it's only different in this sense. We have narrowly defined consortium goals to ensure that there is adoption, call insert for a thing called additive manufacturing. And it's advanced manufacturing, so we could do more than just additive, but that's where we started. So it was a very specific goal, which allowed us then to know who to bring in as consortium with a very specific capacity and capability to get these additive manufactured processes and material systems qualified so that we could put parts on boats. And we see more of those types of consortiums being necessary. And Blue Forge Alliance, as partners, partner first, and certainly partnerships as a service, that is one of our biggest levers in our alliance, is to ensure we're getting the right kind of consortia deployed and focused on this whole mission. When we think about the Navy, because that is who we serve right now as our neutral partner and the mission for the Columbia particularly, our role is really as an enabler and a connector, and also a convener. And by enabler and connector, we mean all the disaggregate or disparate entities that have a role and have a play, but maybe just need a little help in understanding their connectivity into it. These are things like the suppliers, obviously, including the primes and education and technology insertion partnerships. And we think about that enabling and connecting really to build and maintain these relationships for the mission. So how do you enable for the mission? As a convener for the Navy, we think about it from actually a research project that has been, I think it's about 10 or 12 years old now, maybe a little bit older, called Collective Impact. That study was observing and evaluating nonprofits that were convened and the sustainability of those companies and models after some time. The data revealed that the vast majority who had funding that stopped, it stopped their convening as well. But what was remarkable was there was a small group of those companies, nonprofits, that not only sustained and survived, but they excelled, they thrived after even some of the original grant funding had dried up. And they started to further evaluate that. And these 5 things, a common agenda and a shared measurement system and mutually reinforcing activities and comms and this backbone support, those were the 5 common factors, not only that they found in those companies that continue to excel and survive and thrive, they were paid to do those 5 things in the future. So while the grant might have started it up, where the success correlated, and the paper would argue caused a success, was when the convener did those 5 things, were paid to do those 5 things. We think about that similarly with the Navy and the government in general. And really the goal of this convening is to organize and evangelize around the mission. Keep people's focused, phrase, keep the main thing, if you will. And the back half of that is the industrial base. I shouldn't say the back half, the other half of that coin, perhaps. And we've used these words, partnerships as a service and the ecosystems. And by the way, when we think about ecosystems today, it is about accelerating those that currently exist. There are roles for greenfield and new buildings and all that, but there is so much that we think we can do with what currently exists, that we want to make sure we're keeping those ecosystems prioritized around established regions. But we think about the industrial base and our support of it. Partnerships as a service allows us to do these things at scale, speed, access, and scale. The outreach and recruitment I just mentioned earlier, collecting and doing something with both data and intelligence and advisors, and of course, the very specific project partners who help execute on these line of effort projects that the Navy authorizes and approves. And then I've alluded to a little bit to this alliance. It's in our namesake. It is certainly the lever that we see needs to be pulled early and often, if you will. But these are folks who may not have a very specific project on a line of effort, but they do things that improve the Blue Forge Alliance mission and our ability to execute on it, but also for the industrial base just in general. These are folks who work in strategy or network accelerators. They understand and they work within policy and legislative, both federally and at the state and local levels. Folks who do program management, technology transition. So these are the alliance partners really have a play on enabling speed, access, and scale. And so our goal really for that is scaling the development and delivery by using partnerships as a service. And for these ecosystems, we talk about integrate nationally. So what are the good things that are happening or that we find or can fund nationally around economic development or business transitions for technology insertion and even financing and capital? But take that and allow it to be curated locally. And it's not just the transition from something that broadly works somewhere else to someplace new. It's thinking about the locality very specifically. And sometimes this is considered under wraparound services. You think about housing and transport. But there's something about this integrate nationally, catalyze locally that we have found resonates with people who already do a lot of this stuff day to day, like economic development authorities, other localities, especially in the county level support. So how can we either nudge what is already going on to help the Columbia and the submarine industrial base, or how can we bring an opportunity that's applicable to the submarine industrial base that maybe these folks didn't always know about? And the goal of thinking through ecosystems is to organize, evangelize around the mission. So we want to engage with relationships. We want to engage with people. We need the corporate structures for IRS and other reasons and all this, but I think everyone on this call can appreciate that nothing gets done without the people. And we certainly can't do any of that without trust and relationships, which is why we're so highly focused on this alliance and building relationships around the alliance. Kind of summing things up a bit today, as we look through the lens of the current status quo, and especially over the last 15, 20 years, the fragmented supplier network, our goal is to integrate those folks and to get away from unstable demand signals, which is very typical of a government program. But how can we help create and condone, predictable long-term planning and the workforce shortages and to this robust talent pipeline and so on and so forth down the list. The way in which we think and define projects and initiatives and programs is to move from the left, obviously, to the right. And we want to do that with partners. It's alliance is a part of our name. Where are we today? And then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Two ways to look at our impacts to date. One is through the supply chain and supply base in general, where we've recognized 2.5 times improvement in increasing that production capacity. That has come a lot in being able to reduce the acquisition cycle time. Sometimes these are contracts down 50%. Increasing delivery of that sequence critical material that I referenced earlier, improving that by 28%. And this number might not make sense at first, but 900 plus, it's much more than that now, reduced days of delay. From a program management, project management perspective, you can think of this as float. So now you have opportunities to think and be strategic about how you sequence and what you do in parallel or in sequence of other things, because you now have float, because a new technology, in this case additive manufacturing, has been able to reduce a lot of the long lead time issues and challenges. Another way to look at this is from the talent perspective. So we've had over 2 billion impressions for buildsubmarines.com as an awareness factor, which really has resulted in over 2.6 million, if not close to 3 million by now, apply clicks. But not just stopping there, we've had over 25,000 engagements with outreach and workforce development activities across those 30 states, just in a 1-year timeframe. And from the apply clicks and the engagements, we've actually realized over 13,000 over the last year-over-year. I believe that's the data of new hires into the primes companies. So General Dynamics, Electric Boat, and Newport News, Huntington Ingalls, Newport News, shipyards. So these are real metrics gaining on, the talent for the primes we're looking at is somewhere around about 100,000 to 140,000. So we're starting to crest into that rate of scale that we need to hit annually over that 13,000. And all of that has been a drastic improvement from, I guess you would say, life before the partnership that is known as Blue Forge Alliance. So over 200% increase in those annual hires between 21 and 24. So these are just two ways in which we look at some of the impacts. There are many more that are project level that we can talk to folks about, very specific KPIs and all that. But I think it's, for this audience, it's useful to know, what's broadly happening with our production and capacity. It's improving at a pretty significant rate. What's happening with the talent and getting people into the pipeline and hired, it's improving in a pretty significant rate. And with that, I want to stop and just, Jake, I'll turn it over to you and open up for some Q&A. But broadly speaking, that is what Blue Forge Alliance is focused on doing, a little bit about how we're doing it, and most importantly, why we're doing it, sir.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim Shabara, as that was a very informative presentation. And like he said, we do have time for a few questions. The first ones that were coming through had to deal with, how does someone become a recognized or a remembered supplier for Blue Forged Alliance?
Great. We are building that repository out as we speak. So today, a lot of it is projects that so companies that are identified on specific projects, heavily relied on the Navy and some of the folks the Navy already had in the hopper to go execute on those. Of course, us with our network of networks have been able to inform even more candidates, if you will. So we are working on building out that repository so that we can include more folks on project calls, if you will, to align them with those projects that the Navy is authorizing and appropriating. That is separate of, it's probably a good point to remind folks, that's separate of qualifying a company into the submarine industrial base, which is really, not really, it is held by Electric Boat and Newport News, right? So we do what we can to help the process, but most of these have been folks who can help in the sub-tier direct relationships.
Yeah. And then we also did have a few people wondering, obviously you mentioned the 4 areas of advanced manufacturing that you guys look into with the additive and the Industry 4.0, but are there other types of suppliers that you would work with? Bruce in particular says that his company makes nameplates, labels, gaskets, thermal management, a whole bunch of other things. Would that be a supplier that kind of fits into your mission?
Yes, because almost all things are on the table. So to the extent, we kind of came out of the gate, Bruce, with, as you would imagine, the highest critical, the red light flags, all those things first and foremost. but nothing is solved unless almost everything is improved. So all of that is a yes. What the question would be is, where does that align with our priorities, and where does that align with, is that a new entrant, or is that an expansion of a current portfolio for your company into the submarine industrial base? But we are certainly going to be looking at the whole of the boat from the bow to stern, if you will.
Awesome. Also, David wanted to know, and I believe you did touch on this, but when did the alliance go into effect in order to achieve these results?
So founded in November of 2022, but I'd say the first, let's get funding going probably the middle of 2023. And then we have really hit hard in 2024, staffing up for those lines of effort and helping with the supplier development fund process, and then getting obviously the significant impacts of buildsubs.com and all of our marketing campaigns, especially for the hires, but also the training.
Okay. And then this is definitely a hot topic at the moment, but does Blue Forge help assist customers to get on the exempt list when it comes to the potential tariffs that are in effect? Or is there anything that you guys also do with companies that are based in the EU?
Understood. So obviously, the standard response there is your most effective measure is talk to the Bureau of Industry and Standards, BIS, for a lot of the stuff that's going out. You want to talk to your congressional members and maybe some even industry associations on the imports and the tariffs coming in. Right now, we're collecting. It's a great question. And it's relevant, Jake. So right now, we're collecting where currently project participants are anticipating tariff impacts. And then for this point, Blue Forge Alliance is relaying that information as cleanly, as clearly, and timely back to the Navy, so that the government who are funding these programs can make the determination of how to go execute. That would be a very good example, though, of why do you want to have intelligence and data about things that are not just about the projects? And so that's one thing we are trying to do, and to collect and quantify some of that. But right now, it's early still. We don't have necessarily a funded line to go help offset tariffs or do anything. So your best bet is to go talk to your congressional members or other industry associations that are in that policy advocacy space.
Gotcha. Also, James wants to know, since he is a machinist with approximately 30 years of experience, would it be better to get involved with someone like Blue Forge, or try to connect directly with an electric U-boat, or sorry, an electric boat, or a HHI?
That's exactly why buildsubs.coms exist, right? So I would suggest go create a profile, see the job recs. There are training programs on that buildsubs.com platform. So if you need additional, sounds like you're pretty well positioned, but you can do that. Certainly, Huntington Ingalls, Newport News Shipyard, and Electric Boat have their local and other career things they're doing. What we all do is much cooperation, coordination as possible through the buildsubs.com. So that's probably the best. Working at Blue Forge Alliance as an employee is really the network of networkers, right? If you've got the skill set that needs to be employed and deployed across the whole of US, we want to make sure you get into those positions. So that's why buildsubs.com is probably my first suggestion.
Also, Ray wants to know, they are a materials specialist, primarily with silicone, that has numerous applications for submarines. How would they find out if the specific primes or projects would need what they currently have?
So we have a few things in the hopper, not quite ready yet, to understand exactly, answers to responses to those kinds of questions. What else do we need to know about that's being incorporated into the sub? So for right now, I will take actually that specific question and go ask some of our technology and our materials folks, as are those things currently in the project portfolio? And if so, maybe there's a way we can do something post this event, Jake, to showcase and give links to where we can collect that information for folks who have the capacity and the capabilities for it.
Yes, and for all the people asking with specific individual questions about that, we will be able to give those questions to Tim and Blue Forge Alliance after the discussion today. Also, looks like we had a question.
Before we get to that one, Jake, let me finish that thought, because there's some other things. I have loosely used the phrase roadshow.
Mhm.
What we mean by that at Blue Forge Alliance, specifically with our alliance, is we want to go to these regions and counties and areas where capabilities and capacity exist, and do exactly kind of what we just described over a couple questions
Mhm.
today. These are the hot items. These are the needed items. These are the like to have items. It might come in part families by GD&T almost. It might come
Mhm.
in other requirements and specs. It might come in processes. But we would love to share. And you can imagine there's a lot of information we just don't want completely public. So we're trying
Mhm.
to
Right.
figure that out. But we are working through an engagement plan that would bring those types of requirements and demand to the places across the U.S. with partners like GIE and others who could help put the audience in the room so they have awareness.
Okay. Also, uh, the Navy recently was approved funding for $33.7 billion. They're going to be making, I believe, this is according to Bruce, is one Virginia class, couple destroyers. What else would that funding then go towards, from what you've heard?
Good question. So that's a packed one because the White House certainly has some priorities they've mentioned through the executive orders around maritime in general, commercial, particularly if you
Mhm.
think about how a commercial sector can uplift, if not sustain, sometimes the defense sector of that. So I would say for the Navy specific question, the skinny budget was not very clean on the president's budget for 26. The other items I have seen were specific to the nuclear triad, and so Columbia, certainly on the Virginia class, and a couple of the surface ships. And I can't remember off the top of my head, so I will certainly butcher that if I go out on public recorded record. There are areas, though, and I think was that Bruce who had that question.
Yes.
We can come back with the links of where we
Okay.
track even those types of things. But it's a host of stuff. By the way, a lot of that is in the systems, the mission systems and electronics and other stuff going into platforms.
Awesome. And last one, Peter was wondering too, about working with companies in the EU, is Blue
Oh,
Forge Alliance something that's mostly just within the borders of the United States?
uh, not just within, I'd say. We certainly have a high priority, if not sole focus, on the U.S. industrial base to do things that might be exported or might be used with security agreements such as AUKUS, right? We didn't touch on that today, but
Mhm.
that is a policy, a security trilateral security agreement between the U.S., Australia, and the U.K. about subs in particular, and that is all to be determined. But partner first is sort of our mentality in that space. But if the question is more about does Blue Forge Alliance do work, or how would a company do work with EU if they also wanted to do work with Blue Forge Alliance? Generally speaking, we have folks that are in the international global markets that still, because they abide by the security and other controls in the U.S. with their U.S. firm, can still do
Mhm.
work with not just Blue Forge Alliance, obviously with the U.S. Navy. And we're watching all that, the where dollars go for investment, how people run their own business. There's a lot of stuff around export control and ITAR, especially with the Department of State, with AUKUS being a
Mhm.
subject matter. So that is a to be determined, but it's a
Okay.
really interesting story to watch unfold right now.
Awesome. And looks like we have time for one last question. So Seth was wondering, how are you looking to improve the ecosystem model this year to provide resources and connect the talent with opportunity?
Oh, great question. Always improving, number one. So what we have done is expanded some of the folks that we have done early work with, like Hampton Roads with the Workforce Council, other regions that have similar CCAT in Connecticut. Who are those next tiers of folks like that are in regions that aren't currently covered, and how do we integrate nationally, catalyze locally by sharing some best practices, if not some models or extensions of the current folks. So we've got this is a good part to segue into. Obviously we're focused on some of the near term regions,
Mhm.
New England, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, Great Lakes, Alabama. We want to expand to the Gulf Coast states. We want to expand the Midwest region. We want to expand the West Coast, right? So there's plenty of areas that we want to rinse and repeat to some extent, that the things that have worked well for getting talent into those positions. But great question. And we are super focused, especially Josh Kramer, on that part going into this next year.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone in the audience. If there was a question that we were not able to answer today, we will send those Tim's way. So him and the Blue Forge Alliance team will be able to look them over and answer them at their convenience. But obviously, massive thank you to Tim Shabara, the Chief Strategy Officer for Blue Forge Alliance. Also, a massive thank you to our 2025 series sponsor, Renishaw, and today's sponsors, Mazak, Promez, Smithers, and SMW Autoblock. So, Tim, thank you once again so much for all of the information and all of the insight. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Jake. You too.
You can listen to all of our episodes of Manufacturing Matters and Lunch and Learn podcast from the MFG Radio Network on Spotify, Apple Music, and on our websites, todaysmedicaldevelopments.com, aerospacemanufacturinganddesign.com, defenseandmunitions.com, and evdesignandmanufacturing.com.